Tourists and native Floridians alike have flocked to the beautiful city of St. Augustine, thanks in no small part to Henry Flagler, who took it upon himself to create a city for the wealthy. During the 1920s, St. Augustine saw wealth like no other coming in and out. But when the Great Depression hit, an economic line was drawn between the poor and the rich, the haves and the have-nots. As the middle class evaporated, the rich continued to move into the city to be around other rich families, and the poor continued to be pushed to the outskirts. Cheap labor was what kept the hub of St. Augustine running, but it created a severe inequality among its residents. This divide is a large part of what led to the creation of the civil rights movement in St. Augustine. Dr. Robert Haling was many things. He served as an officer in the Air Force and later went on to become the first black dentist to be elected to the American Dental Association. In addition to those accomplishments, he is considered to be the father of the civil rights movement in St. Augustine. In 1960, Dr. Haling set up shop in St. Augustine, and it wasn't long before he joined the local NAACP. He took part in a protest on the 400th anniversary of the city, which caught the attention of the then U.S. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. The Vice President came to St. Augustine and delivered a speech to an integrated crowd, but ultimately no real changes were made. Dr. Haling knew they needed to take a more direct action, so he created the Youth Council for the NAACP. He taught them nonviolent protest methods, such as swimming in an all-white swimming pool or walking on an all-white section of the beach. This encouraged peaceful but noticeable resistance to the segregated system. One nonviolent protest brought much more attention than the others. On July 18, 1963, 23 protesters were arrested while sitting down to eat lunch in an all-white diner. 7 of the imprisoned protesters were juveniles under 18, and 4 of these children were under the age of 10. These children were called the St. Augustine IV, and they were sent off to reform schools to change their behaviors. A full 6 months after the incident, they were the only ones still being punished for the protest. Their case was called an egregious injustice by the media, and the governor agreed. In January of 1964, the 4 children were taken out of the reform school and returned to their parents. The city of St. Augustine failed to comply with the existing federal civil rights legislation and did not implement the changes brought on by Brown v. the Board of Education. Dr. Haling stepped in and held protests, lobbying for suspension of federal funding until the changes were implemented. This led to the KKK openly attacking black citizens in broad daylight. Dr. Haling believed in the nonviolent protests, but he also believed that he and others should be armed. He is quoted saying, "I and others are armed. We will shoot first and ask questions later." When the Klan would ride into the black neighborhoods to attack innocent people, Haling and others would drive them off by shooting their own guns. One night in September of 1963, the Klan abducted Dr. Haling and 3 of his colleagues. They were taken to the outskirts of town, where over 100 Klansmen waited for them. The 4 men were beaten, kicked, and hit with chains, whips, and other clubs. The men would have been killed if not for the highway patrol. They were rescued, and the officers arrested the 4 white men at the scene. Dr. Haling thought, for once there would be justice, but instead, he and his colleagues, who were unarmed, were charged with assault. The 4 Klansmen were released shortly after their arrests, and the charges were dropped. Haling and the other 3 men were convicted of assault. In October of that same year, a car filled with KKK members rode through the black community and started shooting at houses. The community fired back, and someone managed to shoot a Klansman. Concerned with the escalating violence, the NAACP removed Haling from the Youth Council, which led him and others to contact the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and asked Martin Luther King Jr. for help. With Dr. King's help, the movement gained national attention. The SCLC and Dr. Haling enlisted an army of protesters from around the country during the spring break to come to the beaches of St. Augustine and protest in the all-white sections. Both black and white protesters participated in this protest. Dozens were arrested, including the 72-year-old mother of the governor of Massachusetts. Dr. King used this momentum to stage an event at the Monson Lodge, an all-white hotel in St. Augustine. He and a group of black men were going to hold a sit-in at the lodge restaurant, but before they could even enter, they were arrested and jailed. While in jail, Dr. King wrote 17 rabbis all over the country and asked them to come down and try to finish what he started at the Lodge restaurant. They complied, but they were also arrested, making it the largest amount of rabbis ever arrested at one time. The protest came to an explosive end when a group of protesters jumped over the fence of the motor lodge and into the swimming pool. The owner's response was to pour acid into the pool while they were swimming, and many of them were burned. This event was broadcast around the world as it was happening, which helped spread the news and created a national outcry for change.
The governor made a personal appeal to the people of St. Augustine.
The thing that I want to say to the people of St. Augustine and Florida particularly is that we must maintain law and order. That regardless of our feelings for or against certain people, for or against certain propositions, we have a task to perform, a society to maintain, and I anticipate that we will do it.
The next day, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law.
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I want to take this occasion to talk to you about what that law means to every American. My fellow citizens, we have come now to a time of testing. We must not fail. Let us close the springs of racial poison. Let us pray for wise and understanding hearts. Let us lay aside irrelevant differences and make our nation whole. Let us hasten that day when our unmeasured strength and our unbounded spirit will be free to do the great works ordained for this nation by the just and wise God, who is the Father of us all. Thank you and good night.
The black community continued to protest and fight for equality for years to come. But the courageous actions of Dr. Haling and Dr. King are a large part of what led to the thriving community of St. Augustine that we see today.